Hi, and welcome to this very direct presentation that goes over everything that I think you're doing wrong in project management, but also how to reverse it. So it sounds like quite a negative title, and perhaps it is a little bit negative, but we've got a lot of positives in it as well. So stay tuned. So look, let me just introduce myself a little bit. I've been a project management consultant for a long time, and in that time I've worked all around the globe with a lot of different organizations, and I've seen what good looks like, but unfortunately the flip side of that is I've seen far too often what poor performing organizations look like too. And one of the things I specialize in doing is project management maturity assessments, and they come with their own scoring system, whether it's the 4Q, the OPM3, the P3M3 assessment, but it's never really the scores that are that important. It's the assessment of the opportunities for improvement and the recommendations that I might make for organizations to improve their portfolio program and project management practice. Well, it just so happens that I keep seeing the same mistakes over and over and over again in poor performing organizations. And conversely, the high performing organizations just don't make these mistakes. What I've got in this presentation is the top 10 mistakes. There are a lot more than that, but these are the most common ones that I see just repeated again and again and again in the worst performing organizations. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to simply count down from 10 through to number one, the top 10 mistakes that you might be making in your organization that's getting in the way of you being great at project management. So let's start by figuring out what do the best organizations do and what do the other or poorly performing organizations do. Well, the best organizations, well, essentially they expect their projects to be successful. That's it. They just expect that if they choose to do a project, there's a high probability it's going to be successful. And because of that, they know at any point the status of individual projects on a daily basis and overall all of the projects in their portfolio at any point in time. They've got that great visibility of what's going on. They've also got low staff turnover and high staff morale. And they also understand this essential key thing about project management. They know that they achieve their strategic, operational, and financial success with professional project managers and professional project management practice. What do the other organizations do? Well, they don't do any of that. They somehow expect projects to fail or somehow magically stumble across a finish line late, over budget, not quite delivering what they were supposed to. They treat estimating as a weird, superstitious, dark art that it's only guesstimates anyway. They never really check if the project did what it was intended to do, and basically they employ enthusiastic amateurs. So that's setting a bit of context and a bit of background about what we mean when we say the best organizations versus the other organizations. So let's go through the top 10 mistakes that you might be making with your organization. Now, if I was into a bit of clickbait here, the title of this would be the top 10 mistakes you're making in project management. Number one will surprise you. I did think about that, but that's generally not the way I operate. So look, here they are. The first six or seven are in no particular order, but the last three are actually what I consider to be the most important things that you should be fixing first. And number one definitely is the number one. So if you want to take a guess at what the number one mistake might be, go ahead, write it down, and check in when we get there. Look, let's get cracking on. And also just a reminder, if at the end of this presentation you go, oh, I want to talk to Sean about this, or I want to ask questions, you can email me at any time and I'll be more than happy to chat about them. So let's crack on. Number 10, the project management methodology that you may be using or not using, or you don't have one, or conversely, what I've put there is slavish, unquestioning obedience to a methodology in the face of a clear lack of results or resistance or lack of use of it. Now, it is really clear from the research that having a customizable or tailorable methodology works best. So that's what we want you to have. We want you to have a methodology, or plural methodologies, that somehow suit all of your types of projects. Unless you're the sort of organization that does exactly the same type of project again and again and again in terms of duration, complexity, deliverable, you're probably going to need to have some ability to customize your methodology each time you start a new project. And that's what a good organization does. They'll have an extremely tailored methodology, or they'll have multiple methodologies. And when they start a project or a program, they'll sit down and they'll choose which of those methodologies suits that particular initiative. One of the things that I definitely recommend is identifying in your methodology mandatory elements and optional elements. And when you start a project, you sit down and you have a look at the mandatory things you might have in the methodology. And they might be something like financial reporting, change control, things like that. But then you take a look at the optional components and you go, which of the optional components does this project require to improve the chances of the project success? And that's what we want you to do. And don't forget, even with those mandatory components of your methodology, you could have simple, standard, and significant versions of those too. The key thing is to make your methodologies fit your projects. And certainly, if you've got people who are avoiding the use or not using it completely, don't blame the people. It may indicate that they don't have any training, it's hard to find on the intranet, or they just don't believe it's delivering value. So don't blame poor use on the users. It may actually be a really nice clue that it's time to take a look at the process and see if it's fit for purpose and whether it needs tweaking. So there we are. That's number 10. Get yourself a tailored or customizable project management methodology that suits the types of projects that you want to do. Let's take a look at number 9. Oh, this one's an interesting one, because I'm going to put something out there that you may disagree with. But I don't think any project ever in history has ever been justified or completed on the basis of the deliverable that it produces. Just take a moment to let that sink in. Because my opinion is that every project that's ever been initiated and completed has been for a particular benefit that's been expected. And a deliverable has been selected really early on in the process, and that deliverable is expected to deliver the benefit. Now, your benefits could be strategic, operational, financial, non-financial, whatever they are, but the benefits, those things you write down in the business case to justify this investment in this particular project. The problem is then that once the project's underway, everybody gets so enamored and fixated on the shiny, bright deliverable that they forget about the benefits completely. And they pat themselves on the back when the deliverable appears and you can see it, sniff it, kick it, feel it, whatever it is. And that's it. That's success, the deliverable. And they completely forget that that's not the reason for the project. The reason is the thing that the deliverable is supposed to do. And by that point, it's put in the too hard basket. Oh, we haven't got time, we don't have money, we haven't allocated time or cost to it, we didn't include it in the project scope. Let's just get on, the deliverables here. That's good enough. Well, there's a couple of things wrong with that. Number one, you don't know if your investment decisions are actually reaping the benefits they're supposed to. You don't know if you're actually achieving the goals, and you're making huge assumptions about that particular deliverable. You're also giving people permission to write whatever they want in those business cases, because you're never coming back to check, did you achieve the things that the business case said you would achieve, whether it was profit or strategy or anything like that. So what do the best organizations do? Well, they know right at the beginning of any project, they need to define who the benefits owner is going to be, how long and when the benefits realization process is going to be, and they allocate time and cost and resources to it, and they make it part of the project scope. Obviously, there can be some issues here if the benefits aren't going to be realized for weeks, months, or even years after the deliverable appears, because the project manager, quite rightly, may have moved on to other projects. But identifying who the benefit owner is going to be at the beginning and agreeing with them what a benefits realization process may look like and how they're going to report back on whether those benefits have been achieved or not. And the best organizations, they track benefits throughout the entire project lifecycle. In fact, it should be theoretically possible that if halfway through a project you realize you're still delivering a fantastic deliverable, but you realize that it's not going to give the benefits that it's supposed to, you should be brave enough to pull the pin on that project. That's how important benefits are. So get your benefits realization process in place right at the beginning and make your projects about delivering benefits. Let's take a look at number 8. This one probably won't be too much of a surprise to you. Estimating, or what I like to call it, guesstimating. Look, let's be honest, a lot of the estimates you do for time and cost and resources are simply what you have to say to get the project approved and to remove resistance to it. And they're good enough to survive a high-level examination. People go, yeah, that looks about right. But because you haven't put any work into them and they are just guesstimates, they then become a constant source of change requests and take up time and effort throughout the whole project. And of course, expectation management for stakeholders go, but at the beginning you said it would cost this, take this long. Now, why is it costing much more? Well, we know projects are uncertain. We know that. But you can actually use real proven techniques such as reference class forecasting and a variety of proven and defined estimating techniques to help you do better time, cost, and resource estimates. So if you don't know the difference between analogous and parametric estimating, if you don't know the difference between top-down and bottom-up estimating, if you don't know how to use lessons learned, the Delphi technique, or any of those other techniques, then it's probably about time you put some effort into learning about the different forecasting or estimating techniques that you can use, and also understanding the uncertainty that's inherent in any of those estimates, because each of those different techniques has a different level of uncertainty in it, and you can account for that uncertainty in your project and then give a range of time and cost, which is probably quite accurate. But we do know projects change. But if you put more effort up front into your estimates, you use reference class forecasting, you use lessons learned from previous projects, use all of that, you've just got a bit more body behind these guesstimates. Okay, and they won't take up as much time with change requests throughout the project, and your stakeholders will be happy because you're probably going to end up within an acceptable margin from what your initial estimates were. Let's take a look at number 7, lessons learned. Let's be honest, you probably intend to do it, but you probably don't do it. There's many reasons why we don't do it. Often it's because towards the end of the project, which is a great time to do lessons learned, you put onto another project. Now, you should do lessons learned throughout the entire life of the project. There shouldn't just be something you do at the end. There's plenty of opportunities to gather lessons learned throughout the life of the project. And if you do get to the end of the project and you get told, don't worry about that, get on and work on another project, it's because you made the simple mistake of not including the lessons learned work in the project scope at the beginning of the project. Don't forget, when defining your scope statement, there's the product scope statement, which defines the technical requirements of the thing you're building, the product, the deliverable. But there's also the project scope statement, which is all the extra work you have to do on the project, like the startup activity, the reporting, the communications, and the closeout stuff, which includes lessons learned, post-implementation reviews, benefits realization. If you include it all there in the project scope statement, you can then allocate time and cost to it. It can appear in the work breakdown structure, and then even if you are already part-time working on another project, you still have to do this as part of this project because it's expected to be done. But look, let's take a closer look at what the best organizations do when it does come to lessons learned. First up, they realize that there's 3 important steps in lessons learned, and if you don't do all 3, there's no point doing any of them. The first step in lessons learned is to make sure you set aside time and resources to gather those lessons. Actually collate them. Use interviewing techniques and nominal group techniques and workshops and surveys to regularly gather what you did well and what you didn't do so well. So that's the first essential step in a successful lessons learned process. The second is storing them in a place where people can find them. So don't put them just in the folder for that project because nobody's going to find them. You need a centralized database, which can be as simple as an Excel template that's got the lessons learned, and you can filter it by project type and size and date, and it's got keyword searches in it. But there's also some great software out there to collate lessons learned into a central place where people can search it. So those are the first two parts of the lessons learned process: gathering the lessons and storing them. Now, if you just do those two and you don't do the final one, don't bother with those two because you're just wasting your time. The final and essential step in lessons learned is lessons learned. Actually requiring people to go and read these lessons learned and prove that they've read them and show how they're going to use those lessons on their current project. And look, my tip here is the best organizations, they just drop a paragraph or a section into those initiation documents, those business cases, those project initiation documents, anything. And all it says is something along the lines of, what have you learnt from similar projects that we've completed recently, and how have you applied it to this project? That's it. And that way you're forcing the project manager to prove that they've gone and consulted the database and considered what's been done well and what hasn't been done so well on similar projects. I often say as a consultant, if every organization did all three steps in lessons learned, consultants would be out of business. I say it half jokingly, but a lot of the time organizations employ consultants to tell them what they already know. They just forgot to write down. So look, here's a challenge. Put me and other consultants out of business and increase your organizational capability by gathering, storing, and learning from lessons learned. Number 6, project sponsorship. This one is one I see very regularly, that you have a disengaged project sponsor who doesn't really know what their role is not that interested in the project because they've got so much other work on anyway. And at the worst part of it, they may end up having an adversarial relationship with the project manager. Now, all of this comes back to the root cause of the project sponsors not having the training they need to understand what it is that they're supposed to do and how to do it. So the first thing you need to do is, if you're going to appoint a project sponsor to a project, and you should generally in all cases, except if you've got a very small project and a highly competent project manager, I mean, I don't think you need a project sponsor for those sorts of things. But you should then make sure the project sponsor themselves understands what they're supposed to do. Give them a training course. Make them understand what their role is. Get them working really, really well with the project manager. And make sure that they have the delegated authority they need so they can help the project manager out with decisions on the spot. And you don't need to slow a project down by going to weekly or fortnightly meetings of a steering committee, which is probably composed of disinterested people anyway. So that's it. Lift the capability and competency of your project sponsors. You'll have happier project managers and your projects will be more successful. Let's take a look at number 5. Now this one, this year alone, I've worked with several organizations who blame their software, their project management software, for not having visibility of their projects, not being able to see what projects are underway, not having up-to-date status reports. And I pointed out to every one of them that the project management software that they do have is more than capable of doing that and so much more. They just haven't taken the time to learn. And to help you understand, here's an analogy for you. You probably use Microsoft Word, right? Okay. So you've probably taught yourself how to use Microsoft Word, and you consider yourself a proficient user of one of the world's most common bits of software. A couple of questions for you. Can you write a macro in Microsoft Word? Can you open up a document, save it as a new default normal template so that every further document that opens is that template? And can you write VBA script so that you could do simple programs in Microsoft Word? If you answered no to those questions, you're a basic user of Microsoft Word. But funny enough, you're at exactly the same level of most people with their project management software. They simply don't understand what the software is capable of doing, and they think the solution is to go out and get another bit of software. I can guarantee you that if you don't pay attention to the current bit of software, you're going to be in exactly the same position with the next bit of software. You won't understand it, you won't spend the time getting to know it and maximizing it. I really haven't come across a bad piece of software. I've come across many instances of underutilized and misunderstood software as well. And the funny story is, well, I'm not sure if it's funny, but in the last couple of years, I've worked with organizations who've used a particular bit of software, and they've got low scores for their organizational project management maturity. And when we're discussing ways that they can improve, they sort of go, well, this bit of software, it must be contributing to our low project management maturity. It certainly can't be helping us out, and it doesn't provide this reporting and that. And I've had great pleasure in pointing out to them that the two highest scores I've ever given out are for organizations using that bit of software. So it just points out that they're just not using it. So what do the best organizations do? They spend time getting the right software that becomes a single source of truth for all of their portfolio and project work. It's regularly updated. Everybody loves using it and is trained in using it. If they do have to have more than one piece of software for whatever reason, usually it's finance is a bit of a different one, it's tied up with your ERP system, they make sure that the software talks to each other and exchanges data seamlessly. One of the questions I do get asked a bit is, should you develop your methodology, then find a bit of software to mirror that, or should you abandon your methodology or not develop one and get your methodology to mimic your software? It's a tough question, that one, because it really depends on where you are right now. If you've already got a well-established methodology that everybody uses and likes and serves you well, then you're probably better off to try and get software to mirror that and make minor adjustments to it. But if you're in a low state of project management maturity and you don't have a methodology, or you have one that nobody's using, then there might be some merit in considering letting your software define the methodology and making that part of your requirements gathering. And make sure everybody gets regular training on how to use the software. Okay, let's take a look at number 4. Choosing the wrong projects. See this all the time. As a consultant, I often get called in to fix up troubled projects or projects that just aren't performing really well. And more often than not, the cause is this project should never have got off the ground. It was got off the ground because it was a political project, a pet project. It was got off the ground because the estimating was just made up to get it approved. All of these reasons, this project should never have been selected. It was an ad hoc selection process. It was thought to be a nice to have, felt good, gut feel, all of that. What the best organizations do is they have a rigorous and defined project selection process, a project prioritization process, and they're able to assess any initiative that they think of against strategic, financial, and or non-financial criteria and give it the thumbs up or the thumbs down. And once they've been approved, they can then put them into their portfolio and prioritize them according to the particular constraints that they may have. They may have financial constraints or resource constraints or anything else, which means they're allowed to prioritize them. So this is number 1, number 10, number 120. We can only fund 90 this year, etc. So you want to have a clear system in place that allows you to choose the right projects. Now, one issue that we often see is that project managers get given a project well after it's been selected. And this can be a problem as well. So if this happens to you, what we want you to do is to go back and say, why was this project selected? What was it about this project that the organization chose to invest time and cost in? And to truly understand that if you've been given a project, you're not the end, you're not receiving an inevitable failure. Okay, so if you are in a position where you're given a project that's already been initiated, be brave enough to go, can somebody please show me why this particular project was selected? Okay. The PMO. Now, you can call it the PMO, and the P can stand for Project Program and Portfolio. You can call it the Project Support Office, the Project Delivery Office, the EPMO, the Investment Management Office. There's so many names for it, and there should be lots of names for it because every PMO does something differently. you should have a PMO, because the PMO represents the center of excellence, whatever that means at this point in time for the organization, and that's why you need to have one. So organizations that have any form of PMO outperform organizations that don't. But let's be honest, we've probably known of plenty of PMOs that just become political footballs, and the minute budgets become tight, the PMO is disbanded because it can't prove what it does, or it doesn't actually add value. So I'm a major advocate of having something in the organization which helps project success. Now, at one end of the spectrum, it might be just a supportive project support office, which offers some optional templates for project managers to use and maybe a little bit of training. At the other end of the spectrum, though, your PMO, and I've certainly seen these PMOs, they're responsible for the hiring and firing of the project managers, the training, the project selection, the portfolio prioritization, the risk management, the execution and delivery of all the projects, and the benefits realization, all of that. So somewhere between those extremes is a PMO, again, whatever you want to call it is fine with me, that is right for your organization right now. And that should support the resources you give to it. So if you've only got one person or two people allocated to your PMO, don't make it responsible for everything. With only one or two people, it should only be responsible for, I don't know, developing a methodology and suggesting that people use it and maybe doing some project health checks or something like that. The important thing is you've got to have something which supports it. And I guess I can put it to you like this. Can you imagine an organization going ahead and doing business successfully without a finance department or without an HR or people department? I bet you can't. And I'm just always curious about why it is that organizations see that they must have a finance department. They don't even question that. And they must have an HR department, and they don't question that. But ask them to have a project management department, the thing that delivers their success, their strategic and operational success, and that becomes an optional thing. Doesn't make any sense at all. So you should have a PMO, and the best organizations, they see project management as essential to their success as having a finance department or a human resources department. It's a non-negotiable. In fact, I love seeing the rise of these new roles. We know about the chief finance officer or the chief people officer. We are seeing the rise of the chief project officer. It's actually at C level we're seeing these people recognized. So the key thing is have an appropriate PMO. It can take some working out to figure out what's right for you now, what's right for you in a year's time, what's right for you in 2 years' time, because it will change. It's just got to be right for you right now, supporting good project management practice. Number 2 on the list. Oh, you can feel the tension building as we build down to number 1. Have you given any thought to what number 1 should be? There we are. That's me trying to use my clickbait approach. What is number 1? Number 2, though, is delegated authority. And this is quite simply, you're not giving your project managers enough delegated authority. They're constantly having to go to the project sponsor or the steering committee or other operational managers for approval to do their job. If you trust your project managers and they're competent and they're smart and they're committed to their projects, you should give them plenty of delegated authority. If you don't, you're basically saying to them, we don't trust you. We don't think you're competent. We think you need to be, wrapped in cotton wool, and you need to come to us asking for permission all the time. That's certainly not what the best organizations do. The best organizations absolutely empower and trust their project managers completely, and they give them plenty of authority, financial authority, change request authority, all the different authority they need to successfully manage their project. I'm reminded of an extreme story that I didn't think ever existed. I knew the theory of it, but many years ago at a conference, I met somebody. This person was a software project manager at a large multinational that you do know, and you may use some of their products. And they said that they had no delegated authority at all, and their steering committee met every week. Well, that's ridiculous in itself, a steering committee meeting every week. And they had to take all of their change requests every Monday to their steering committee for approval or to be declined. And what was actually happening was they would walk out of this meeting with all the approved changes or declined changes. They get back to work with their team, and maybe on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, another change request come in. The project may have to stop sometimes because the steering committee wouldn't meet till the next Monday. Now, that's an extreme example, but it does point out one of the major issues with not giving your project managers the right level of delegated authority so they can get on and do what they're there to do, which is manage the projects. So give them what they need and trust them and empower them. Okay, here we go. The drum roll. I do need a drum roll. Maybe I should insert a drum roll. Anyway, there's a drum roll now in your head, and it's going, here it comes, number one. The number one reason, and this is the number one reason for poor project performance, is it's the people. It's the project managers. That's it. If you fixed this one issue, a lot of the other issues that we've already covered would resolve themselves because you'd actually have competent people who deal with it. What we find at the moment in the profession of project management is there are far too many accidental project managers with few or no qualifications or any ongoing professional development plans. And that's what you get, these wonderful, enthusiastic amateurs. Now, I'm not saying they're not wonderful people and they're not passionate and they're not smart, but think about this. Think about a dentist or a plumber, you choose. But let's say that you had a sore tooth, really sore, and you needed to go to the dentist. And you got in contact with two different dentists, and you wanted to assess which one you should go to. And they both said to you, I've been a dentist for 10 years. I've got 10 years experience with dental work. Okay, that's great. What about one of them says, well, actually, not only do I have 10 years experience, I'm trained as a dentist. I'm certified as a dentist. It's current. And next week, I'm off to a workshop on the latest orthodontic techniques. So on one hand, you've got somebody who's just purely based on experience. On the other hand, you've got somebody who's got experience, plus they've got qualifications and professional development. Now, nothing beats experience as a teacher. But even better than experience alone is qualifications and credentials and ongoing professional development. And I will share a story with you to illustrate the point. Earlier this year, I was working with an organization to do a project management maturity assessment, and it was initiated by the CFO. And one of the recommendations was, well, your 50 or 60 project managers, of them, 5 of them had any credentials at all, and they need to have credentials. And he said, well, why? Experience is the thing, isn't it? I said, look, experience is fantastic. You can't beat experience. I said, just out of curiosity, in your department, you're the CFO, how many of your team do not have a Bachelor of Commerce degree, and how many of them aren't chartered accountants? And he laughed and said, well, none of them. They've all got Bachelor of Commerce degrees, and they're all chartered accountants. And I said, yeah. And just over in the HR department there, how many of those people do not have a degree in organizational or industrial psychology and aren't a member of the local human resources department? He said, well, he doesn't know, but he assumes they've all got some sort of credential, qualification and professional membership. And I said, then why is it that the people charged with delivering your project success have none? And the light, you could see the light just click in his head. He's like, yeah, I said, that's it. And they're not bad people. I'm not saying they're bad people, but it's time to end the accidental project manager. I'm sure you're aware of it, but there are universities offering bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and PhDs in project management now. There are framework level credentials like the Project Management Institute's Project Management Professional (P&P) credential, or there's framework level credentials from IPMA or APM as well. These are framework level credentials that require you to have some experience under your belt before you're even allowed to sit, and you have to demonstrate broad knowledge of a body of knowledge. That's why we like framework credentials, not just methodology credentials like Prince 2 or Method 1, 2, 3 or an agile methodology like Scrum. Those are methodology credentials, and anybody can get those. What we want to see is properly credentialed project managers and people who commit to their ongoing professional development. So they should be attending conferences, they should be attending workshops, they should be committing to their ongoing professional development. Let's bring the profession of project management up to the same level as all the plumbers and dentists and lawyers and accountants that we work alongside. In order to do this, the best organizations do recruit based on experience and qualification. So yes, they want 5 years experience, 10 years experience, and you can prove that, but they also want that bachelor's degree, master's degree, and or something like a PMP credential as well to prove that you're certified and you know your stuff on top of the experience. They'll also have a defined competency framework within the organization, which defines the roles and the competencies that you must display in order to hold that role or to advance to that role. And they'll support people getting the extra professional development they need to enhance their career and become better project managers. That's what the best do. The worst don't do that. They have a poorly defined recruitment process focused on experience. They don't require you to be certified. They don't require you to have ongoing professional development because that's a cost, isn't it? And then they have poor performance and just expect that that's the norm because they've got those wonderful, passionate, enthusiastic amateurs. Now, the other issue with the people is too many organizations use too many contractors to deliver their projects. And I know that there's an argument that projects are by their nature short term and that overall the portfolio may have some, peaks and troughs in work performance or work allocation or work available. But far too often I see organizations that have a constant multi-year stream of work ahead of them. And they're using contractors to do that work for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I've come across organizations where there's been contractors there for 15 years. So what's the problem? The problem is, quite simply put, you'll never internalize excellence with external people. That's it. A contractor, again, I'm not commenting on people personally, they're wonderful people, but they're worried about their next contract. They'll worry, that's their loyalty to their contract and that, and they'll keep an eye out for other jobs and things like that, and they won't be fully committed to the organization. So if you truly have a long ongoing portfolio of work, get rid of the contractors, make them salaried, bring them on board, bring them part of your team, make them part of your organizational culture. Yes, reserve some small amount of contractors for genuinely fluctuating work levels where you need to bring people on and let people go. But too many times I see contractors being used for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and they're never truly part of the organizational culture, and they're never committed to improving the project management methodology or their level of competency, because that's the other issue, isn't it? Who's going to pay for their professional development? The organization says, well, we don't need to pay for your professional development. You're a contractor. And the contractor says, well, why do I need to pay for it? I've already got a job. Anyway, that's the number one reason of poor performing organizations. It's the competency and capability of your project managers. Oh, and if you don't know what the difference is between competency and capability, you're probably capable of driving a car, but how competent are you at driving a car? So you want capability and competency as part of your project managers. So that is the number one reason. And honestly, you could probably ignore the other 9 as distinct streams of work if you just got good, competent people and supported them. They would fix all those other things too. So it's one of the main recommendations I give organizations now. And amongst all the recommendations I might make with a project management maturity assessment, the key one that I always say is first and foremost, get competent people on the job and they'll take care of everything else. They'll fix up the problems with your benefits realization, your methodology, your risk management, your communications. They'll fix that up because they're competent and they want to do well. Look, so that's it. As I promised at the beginning, this is a quick fire introduction to the 10 most common mistakes that organizations make when it comes to portfolio and project management. There are a lot more, and I could spend hours going through them. But as I said at the beginning, these are the ones that I see most commonly out there. So look, we're going to come to the end of the presentation now with an invitation to you. I would love to hear from you, hear about your experience. If you want to disagree with me, that's fine. If you want to share your war stories, if you want to catch up and just chat about anything that I've put into this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about the profession of project management, and I'm more than happy to catch up online, or if you happen to be in Christchurch, New Zealand, to catch up in person and chat about project management. So look, thanks so much for the last 40 minutes of your day. I appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks a lot.